Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about the film Road to Morocco from 1942. And this continues my series where I review all of the Road 2 pictures starring Bob Hope, Bing Crosby, and Dorothy Lamour. If you're gonna see only one Road 2 picture, I guess this would be the one. It's the most famous, it's the biggest hit, it's the highest regarded of all of them, and it's a really fun movie. This was the only one I had seen before doing this series, and I absolutely fell in love with it. There's a fun to it, there's a newness to it that you hadn't really seen in comedy in Hollywood. There's a lot of fourth wall breaking, there's kind of a sense of Warner Brothers Looney Tune cartoons throughout it. There's just a fun, free spirit nature to it. And even having watched the previous two Road 2 pictures, this is an artistic departure in such a way. It's directed by a different director, Victor Schertzinger, who directed the first two, had died between Road to Zanzibar and Road to Morocco, so they work with David Butler. And the way they made this film is almost perfect for the Bob Hope, Bing Crosby chemistry that makes these movies so alive. It's almost like this film is more concerned with them as a duo than anything to do with plot, and it's just so freeing. This was a ginormous hit. It was such a big hit, they actually shot and completed Road to Utopia, and they had to shelve it for a couple years because this kept making money. It was a huge hit overseas with the GIs during World War II. It was just a massive movie, and it changed this franchise from still being a huge moneymaker to being the gigantic franchise that it was. I think a lot of that is this is considered the first film to break the fourth wall. I don't know if it actually is the first Hollywood film to break the fourth wall, but there's a difference between what is the first film and what popularized it and what influenced everyone else breaking the fourth wall. And I think Road to Morocco definitely, absolutely does that. The first time I saw this, I was like, I don't really get Bob Hope. As a young film person, I didn't get it. Like, I was like, that's my grandfather's generation. Maybe it's not funny. Maybe it doesn't age well. And suddenly, after this film, I got Bob Hope. I knew who Bing Crosby was. I respected Bing Crosby. But Bob Hope and the way he breaks the fourth wall in this film, although they had made fourth wall breaking jokes in Zanzibar and quite frequently in this film as well, them looking at the camera and singing directly to the audience in a way that knowing like, hey, we're in a movie, this is a set, we're just joking around type of thing, was completely new, and audiences absolutely loved it. It's a very important movie. It's in the Library of Congress, selects films to be restored and kept safe for all time, and this is the only one of the Road pictures. This is always put on the greatest comedies of the Hollywood era and the greatest comedies of all time, nominated for 2 Academy Awards, one for original screenplay and one for sound editing. And it's such a breath of fresh air. Even in terms of the series, it's hard not to fall in love with Road to Morocco. Jeff and Orville, Jeff being Bing Crosby and Orville being Bob Hope, continuing the tradition of having the dorkiest names possible in these movies. The film kind of starts off not like a typical road picture. The sub they're on has exploded, and it's because Bob Hope tried to light a cigar in a no smoking area and it exploded, and now they've suddenly made a raft and go to Morocco, find a camel, take that camel to town, and then after ordering way too much food realize they have to pay for it, so Bing Crosby sells Bob Hope into slavery, but then Bob Hope is bought by a princess, played of course by Dorothy Lamour, and then Dorothy Lamour needs him because there has been an omen set that her first husband would die within a week, but her second husband would be the love of her life, and so she does this because she wants to marry her husband, played by Anthony Quinn, and she wants to marry this other guy so he'll die so she can live happily ever with Anthony Quinn. So she decides to pick Bob Hope, and Bing Crosby's first thinks he's in slavery and is trying to save him, but then realizes he's gonna get married, and they try to hopefully get out of this one. The big difference between this film and the previous two films is Victor Schertzinger had died, and David Butler came in to direct this film. And David Butler's direction is a lot more looser. Technical wise, he's not as good as Victor Schertzinger by any means, but I think that direction works better for this. Victor Schertzinger, his first take at a road picture wasn't really that good. It wasn't awful, but it was a little too serious. His second one's more of a direct parody. This is still a parody, more of a Arabian Nights type of movie, but it kind of doesn't really care about that. It's more about the Bing and Crosby and Dorothy Lamour and them doing wacky, crazy stuff, and less about the Arabian Nights parody. That's so secondary in this. And that's a difference between the other ones that were a lot more plot heavy. I wonder if that's the direction, or the other thing that's often been discussed is that this is the first road picture that was developed for Crosby and Hope and Dorothy Lamour and the whole setup they already had, whereas Road to Singapore, which was completely rewritten a lot of times, so this argument kind kind of falls apart in my mind, but a lot of people use it, and I think it's worth noting that Road to Singapore was developed for someone else, and then they rewrote it and kind of made it their own with Don Hartman and Frank Butler, who is not related to David Butler as far as I can tell. I couldn't find anything. If they were or weren't related, there was just nothing. They did that to Road to Singapore. Road to Zanzibar was already a cliche Darkest Africa script, so they turned it into a parody, but this one was written specifically as a film for Hope and Crosby and Dorothy Lamour. It doesn't really matter how a film was developed, it matters how it ends up, but it seems interesting that this seemed to get what works best, and it's almost like it kept developing the idea. Like the first film, they're like, okay, this works, but really the best thing is the chemistry between Hope and Crosby. And then the second one, they're like, we'll just keep the parody thing and do more of the chemistry, and Zanzibar works even better. And Morocco goes, let's just drop the parody stuff, even though that's in there, it's just not as interesting. Let's go more wackier and more jokes, because that's what people are remembering. They're remembering the patty cake stuff. They're remembering Bob Hope's quips. They're remembering Crosby's songs, and they highlighted it in very much a sequel-y kind of way, just giving people what they wanted, but it like works so perfectly. I think the other thing about Road to Morocco, one of the comedy things that audiences love, and I think it's something that it's hard to define, it's kind of the same thing with a great stunt or a great action movie. It works the same with comedy, where you can't believe you're seeing a movie do this. You're like, oh my god, that's incredible. And having this kind of comedy and having even the movies kind of change where it's suddenly like the production's cheaper. They're singing a song directly to the camera, referencing Dorothy Lamour. They say her by name. They're like, we're going to run into Dorothy Lamour later. You know what this is. There hadn't been a movie that really did that before. Was self-aware, was referential, that was breaking the fourth wall. And audiences knew all these things. They saw a lot of these movies in a tongue-in-cheek way, in an ironic way. That's not something that's new in the 80s and 90s. You didn't invent irony, kids on the internet. That's been going on for a long time. And so people did have this attitude, and to see that reflected on the big screen was a ginormous deal. And I think that's why this was such a big deal, and why Bob Hope and Bing Crosby became superstars, particularly in the period of the 40s, because suddenly you're like, wow, this is new and different, and people fell in love with it. It really is the forefather to all the breaking the fourth wall stuff, and even like Deadpool, because a lot of that came from this. Even Seth MacFarlane is very influenced by this, and most references to the Road movies when they sing that kind of parody song is a direct parody of the Road to Morocco song, which is kind of interesting. I like how wild and wacky it is. Many reviews bring up how this is similar in terms of its references and breaking the fourth wall to Bugs Bunny and Looney Tunes, and there's a certain freewheeling, anything can happen attitude to it, which again is more freeing since the other two films felt more plotted. I don't know if Victor Schertzinger, I'm curious what his Road to Morocco would have been, but I think David Butler, who mainly ended up working in TV and like Leave It to Beaver and stuff, I can't find any films that he did before or after this that are as notable or anywhere close to Road to Morocco, but he did become a TV director, and maybe his crappier production is why. But like the stuff like they have these random camels start making jokes during a sequence that would probably be a lot more plot heavy. It's like he instantly goes, just cut in jokes and gags. I hate that usually in a movie where they overload it with gags and jokes, and you're just like, calm down, and like, are you that insecure? And I don't think it's insecurity. I think it's realizing like you didn't come to this movie for a plot and to see people have a fight towards the end. You came for the jokes and to have a great time. And to have camels make jokes like is ridiculous, but it's like so hilarious and so freeing, and sometimes it's like almost surreal and weird. It's just like so awesome. That's one of the things about Road to Morocco I like. It's like, I can't believe I'm seeing this. And it having that sense of play that usually is more evident in animation was something people really didn't expect. And actually, since animation has been more influenced by these movies than anything, is kind of interesting, because I think people were just shocked to see a live action film do that. This is, to me, one of the best written. A lot of the improv stuff that they claim wasn't actually true. Apparently they did memorize stuff and go on set and act like it was an improv, from my understanding. And I also think the chemistry in this film is so much more fully formed, and that they know how to use it better on screen, although they always had amazing chemistry. But also Dorothy Lamour is perfect. Her chemistry with these guys gets better and better as these movies go on, and I really love her in these films, and she's so comfortable with them at this point. It's like she knows exactly how to work with them. This is their third movie working together. Bing Crosby has a lot of classic songs in this, obviously Road to Morocco, but Moonlight Becomes You is also really beautiful. Even Dorothy Lamour gets a song by herself, which I believe is the first time that's happened. I don't think that happened in Zanzibar. I really love how this film showcases the three of them. It seems to care more about that than anything else. And the Arabian Nights thing, it's clearly playing it like it's a joke, like it's silly, which is interesting to do a parody like that. It's just almost like they kind of just care about the jokes, and I love that attitude towards it. I actually like the fourth wall breaking, like, we know what you're talking about. David makes that reference, nothing will happen happen because we have 5 more years on our contract with Paramount. It's like, obviously, like you'd say that to your date if you're going to the movie, like, you know, oh, this guy's not going to die in the movie. He's the movie star. And they like just flat out say it. Some of it is you have to understand the context of classic Hollywood, but I still find this movie very, very funny. The first time I saw it, I was on air for like a week. Sometimes comedies don't age well, even comedies from 20 years ago. And this is from like World War II era. There's a sense in comedy where you feel like they will make fun of anything and anything's funny that just makes you giddy in a way because it makes you feel open. And I think that's what Road to Morocco has. To me, I still think the biggest star of this is Bob Hope. Bob Hope is just really funny in this. The way they reference things and have things turned back around that you don't think will, and callbacks, it's just so ingenious. I mean, in some ways I can't really critically rip it apart. It is interesting that to make these films better, the production quality had to decrease. The production value not as important as the jokes and their chemistry, and they're right, and I think it works well, but it also has that sense that a good comedy does, like something like Annie Hall, that like when he has the ring, he's like, it's like I was a monkey's uncle and he turns into a monkey. I think that surprise makes you laugh. If it's expected, I don't think it's necessarily as funny, but if it surprises you, that's so much funnier. And that's what I kept thinking about while I was watching. I was like, there's a lot of like surprising jokes in this and things that there's certainly the staples of the series, like the patty cake, which they make fun of how it's a staple of the series, and the songs and things like that. But I think the reason people kept seeing Road to Morocco is it just felt so different. It is a little weird. It's kind of like the third Friday the 13th, where what the series is known for isn't the first movie, it's the third one. The third Friday the 13th is the first one Jason wore the hockey mask, if you don't know Friday the 13th. But it's similar to that in that suddenly, like, you think Friday the 13th, you're actually thinking about the third one, the iconic imagery. And the idea of the road movies, you probably aren't thinking about Road to Singapore or Road to Zanzibar, you're thinking about Road to Morocco. It's interesting that it took them a while to find the real voice of it. And it's also interesting to see franchises continue to find ways to develop things and find what works for them on more of a theoretical level. And that might seem like I'm reading into it, but I think theoretically they realized, in a way that seems more box office and business, well, why do people want to see these? How can we deconstruct this to more of a basic level? And I think as a comedy and what they were doing, it works out perfectly and makes perfect entertainment. And usually a better sequel, even going into Empire Strikes Back or a James Bond movie or even Creed recently, if you think about a theoretical reason for it to exist, it's almost always better. If you think like, well, how could another road movie exist after Road to Zanzibar? And if they had just done another direct parody and had Victor Scherzinger lived or directed it or whichever, I don't think this movie would be what it is. This shows what makes a great sequel, is thinking about how do we make it and how do we make it fresh. And it's interesting that these films kept getting fresher and fresher as they went on to this point. It's beautiful to be able to experience why a film was so renowned and successful, and it's almost like such a well-written, beautiful comedy. How could you not nominate it for Best Original Screenplay? How could it not be this big thing? The thing that people say with a lot of the Road 2 pictures is how it kind of uses racial stereotypes, but it is parodying Hollywood films that were already doing that. So this one gets mentioned a lot, and it's even on its Wikipedia about Middle Eastern culture, and even he makes fun of a mentally disabled character at one point, and those parts aren't particularly funny. But I would suggest moving past those parts. I don't think racism against Middle Eastern people is as extreme, because much like I've discussed in the other ones, they're making fun of those franchises and making fun of how ridiculous they are. And in a lot of cases, since they made fun of how ridiculous they are, they ended up ending those tropes and ending those racist characters. So it's kind of funny, since these outlived it, they've gotten accused of something that they actually ended. I don't think they were made to end them, but if you really think about it in a way, it's kind of interesting that they end up having to wear a lot of the brunt of it, just because these movies have had a higher profile in the end, but they were actually created to make fun of these type of movies that were existing in Hollywood. I think it's more playing with it and doing it in a very ridiculous way. I don't think it's necessarily making fun of Middle Eastern culture. I think really what it's doing is making fun of these movies that use and exploit Middle Eastern culture and using the cliches to make something funny with it, and therefore making it silly, and therefore having them move on from those movies. If you really go into it, it's not doing what they're saying it's doing. They're just kind of finding a shocking reaction and not really looking into film history to make a political correct point spotlight that isn't really deserved. This is a movie that is an amazing, beautiful Hollywood comedy. It'll make you laugh, it'll make your grandmother laugh, it'll make your mom laugh, and it's the same kind of beautiful jokes throughout it. It's not inappropriate humor, it's just good humor. I think a good joke doesn't need to have a curse word or something about sex in it, but a good joke can have that too. It's just the formation of the joke and how funny you can be with it. And Bob Hope got that. And that's why this film has lived on for so long. That's why Morocco has influenced so much. And even Family Guy's doing Road to Morocco jokes in it is because of how wonderfully and fun this movie is. It's kind of silly, the production's kind of crappy, but I just love how fun it is. It's one of the most fun movies I've ever seen in my life. The Road 2 movies were fun popcorn movies for people. They were the biggest franchise, one of the biggest blockbusters at the time. And when you think of that, you think of lighter fare, but this is smart, lighter fare. This is expertly done lighter fare. And I know, maybe it's not the most artistic, biggest vision of a movie, but I still appreciate someone making lighter fare so absolutely perfectly. I have like 4 more road pictures to watch, but to me, this is the classic Road 2 movie, and it's the classic fun road movie. Even now, I can safely say this is one of the best classic Hollywood comedies, and it's a beautiful comedy that I just love experiencing and love falling in love with and laughing with. It's fun to watch a fun movie, but it's even more fun to watch an expertly made, smartly made, really fun movie like Road to Morocco. And if you've ever wanted to understand what a good old comedy is, Road to Morocco is the absolute perfect example. And if you've ever wanted to get into this series, absolutely watch this one first, because it's really hard not to fall in love with it. So if you have seen Road to Morocco and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to. And check out my Road 2 review playlist. Currently I only have Road to Singapore, Zanzibar, and Morocco, but if you're watching this much later, I will hopefully have even more Road 2 reviews within that playlist. So check that out if you would like to. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you next time.